Impression compound. Based on elasticity, impression materials are of two types, rigid and elastic impression materials, of which rigid impression materials comprises of impression plaster, impression compound, zinc oxide eugenol impression paints and impression waxes. The elastic impression materials include synthetic elastomers and hydrocolloids. Under the synthetic elastomers comes the polysulfides, polyethers and the silicons. The hydrocolloids includes reversible and irreversible materials. So our impression compound is a rigid or inelastic impression material. The synonyms include dental compound, model compound, modeling compound, and the commonly called impression compound. Impression compound is a mucocompressive, rigid, reversible material which sets by temperature change. It is classified as type 1 impression compound, that is used for making impression of edentulous ridges. Type 2, that is tray compound, which is a more viscous one used to form a tray for construction of a denture. According to ADA specification number 3, type 1 is the low fusing compound, that is above 45 degrees Celsius. It consists of the green stick compound and the impression compound. Type 2 is the high fusing compound, that is above 70 degrees Celsius. It is the tray compound. Impression compound is supplied as sheets, cakes, sticks and cones, as you can see in these pictures. The trade names include DPI, Kerr, Highflex and Wident. Uses are: it is used for making preliminary impression in an edentulous mouth, for individual tooth impression, border molding, that is used with green stick, to check the undercuts in inlay preparation, to prepare a special tray, that is done with the tray compound. Let's see the composition of impression compound, the inelastic impression material. The first component is natural or synthetic resins. It is copal resin as well as rosin, 20% each. The function is it helps in improving the thermoplasticity and gives flow and cohesions. Next is waxes, which includes bees, carnauba wax or paraffin, which is 7% in constitution. It improves the thermoplasticity and produces a smooth surface for the impression. Various types of oils and fats include stearic acid, shellac and gutta percha. It constitutes 3% of the composition. It is a plasticizer to improve the flow, plasticity, workability and as well hardens the compound. Next is French chalk, talc and diatomaceous earth, that is in the major constitution. It consists of almost 50%. It improves the strength and reduce thermal expansion and contraction. Rouge, that is basically ferric oxide, is found in traces in the compound. It is a coloring pigment which is reddish brown in color, that gives that color to the impression compound. Now we'll see the various properties. The first one being the glass transition temperature. It is basically the temperature at which the material loses its hardness or brittleness on heating and forms a rigid mass on cooling, is referred as glass transition temperature. It is approximately 39 degrees Celsius for impression compound. Once the impression tray is seated, it should be firmly held in position until the first fusion temperature and later the glass transition temperature is reached. Thus, the impression is made above the fusion temperature, whereas it is removed from the mouth only after it cools down to its glass transition temperature. Now coming to the term fusion temperature, the temperature below which a definite reduction in plasticity occurs during cooling of the impression compounds. For impression compound it is approximately 43.5, whereas for tray compound it is approximately 65 to 70 degrees Celsius. All the impression with the compound should be made above this fusion temperature. Below this temperature, an accurate impression cannot be expected. Now coming to thermal conductivity. Impression compound is a poor conductor of heat. Average linear contraction of impression compound at 25 degrees Celsius is 0.3 to 0.4%. Thus, compound needs extended time to achieve thorough heating or cooling. The material should be uniformly soft at the time it is placed in the tray and thoroughly cooled in the tray before the impression is withdrawn from the mouth. Due to low thermal conductivity, outer side cools rapidly and inner side remains soft. Thus, adequate time is required for cooling. Now coming to the flow property. Highly viscous and mucocompressive is our impression compound. According to ADA specification number 3, type 1 have flow not more than 6% at 37 degrees Celsius, flow not less than 80% and not more than 85% at 45 degrees Celsius. For type 2, the flow is not more than 2% at 37 degrees Celsius, the flow is not less than 70% and not more than 85% at 45 degrees Celsius. Viscosity. Impression compound is the most viscous of all impression materials. It is 70 times greater than impression plaster, 100 times more than the light body elastomers. It limits the degree of fine details which can be recorded in the impression. So characterizes impression compound as a muco-compressive impression material. So it compresses the mucosa and you're going to get an overextended impression with an impression compound. Coming to the dimensional stability, residual mechanical stresses are incorporated in impression compound during heating, manipulation and recording impression. Distortion may occur during storage period due to relaxation of these stresses. For accurate results, models should be poured as soon as possible. Coming to the manipulation, it is softened in warm water in a thermostatically controlled water bath in the temperature range of 60 degrees Celsius to 70 degrees Celsius. After the compound is removed from the water bath, it is usually kneaded with finger in order to obtain uniform plasticity throughout the mass. When it is placed in a non-perforated stock tray, it is adapted well, and after the compound is molded to the shape of the impression tray, it is inserted into the mouth and held gently in position until the impression cools. This is the hot water bath that we use for kneading the impression compound to soften the impression compound. And the right side picture shows the first one being the lower mandibular impression and the next one is the maxillary impression obtained using the impression compound in a non-perforated stock tray. It is then removed and checked for any fracture or deformation. Then the cast should be poured without any delay. The cast should be separated from the impression by immersing it in warm water after the stone sets. Coming to the kneading, there are basically two techniques for kneading impression compound. The wet kneading, that is more common, the other one is dry kneading. The technique of softening consists of submerging the compound in water bath is known as wet kneading. That is what we explained earlier. Green stick compound that is used for border molding purposes is softened by warming over a gas flame and then kneaded. This is known as the dry kneading technique. The precautions that you need to follow while using impression compound, the first being the compound should not be allowed to boil or ignite, otherwise the plasticizers are volatilized. Prolonged impression in a water bath. Prolonged immersion in a water bath is not indicated as the compound may become brittle and grainy because some of the low molecular weight ingredients may leach out. Overheating leads to sticky compound and it might become difficult to handle. Avoid incorporation of water during kneading. It increases the flow after hardening. Impression is removed from the mouth only after it has completely hardened. During cast separation, excessive hot water is also avoided as it can make the material sticky and difficult to remove at the cast. Also, the sticky material can stick onto the cast and it might be difficult to remove it entirely even if you place it in mild hot water. So this is the green stick compound. It is supplied in the cylindrical form, almost 10 centimeter in length and 6 millimeter in diameter. Fusion temperature comes around 43 to 45 degrees Celsius. Uses of the green stick compound include border molding of special tray that is used to record the functional depth of the sulcus. Not only the depth, functional width and depth of the sulcus. It is also used for copper tube impressions for making impressions of single tooth prepared single tooth impressions. Coming to the procedure, green stick is heated uniformly over the flame, that is a dry kneading technique. It is applied over the borders of the special tray. Adapt it well to the borders. Temper it in water. Temper it in first hot water and then cold water, and then put it inside the patient's mouth. Different movements of the jaws is done and it is removed after it hardens completely. This is how it is done. The green stick is heated over a flame. Overheating will result in dripping of the material. So control it and add it onto the borders of the special tray. Adapt it to the borders well. Heat it once more onto the flame. Temper it in hot water, then into the cold water, and then it placed in the patient's mouth and various moldings are done, functional molding, and the mandibular movements are performed. The advantages included is non-irritant and non-toxic, and any error comes you can reheat and mold again, so it is reusable as well as it is economical, can be added and readapted, used in combination with other materials, that is the green stick compound can be used for border molding and the impression can be made with a light body elastomeric material, zinc oxide eugenol impression material, like that. Long shelf life of about 5 years is there for our green stick compound. Disadvantages include it has poor dimensional stability, poor surface detail, large coefficient of thermal expansion, and a poor conductor of heat. It is non-elastic and cannot be used where undercuts exist. It compresses the soft tissue while making an impression. Now coming to the disinfection of this inelastic impression materials, 2% alkaline glutaraldehyde solution, sodium hypochlorite and iodophos are commonly used for disinfection. Impression, you can follow either the immersion technique or the spray technique. Since the material is hard enough, you can use the immersion technique. So it is immersed for almost 10 minutes in these disinfecting solutions. After that, it is taken out, rinsed thoroughly with water and poured. Coming to the storage, the cast should be poured as soon as possible within the first hour to avoid distortion due to stress relaxation of the impression compound. So, coming to the conclusion, impression compounds are one of the inelastic impression materials. It is used basically for making impressions of edentulous mouths. It is not used in dentulous mouths because it is inelastic and cannot be used in undercut areas. Thank you.